Okay, congratulations. We are about to talk about sharding, which is our approach to horizontal scalability. But more importantly, sharding is the final topic, the final real substantive topic of the developer course. So you have made it a tremendous distance in the last 6 weeks. So congratulations. At the beginning of this, you may not have known anything about MongoDB, and now you can write programs in MongoDB, and you understand the aggregation framework and performance and replication. And so now the last big topic is sharding. So as I said, sharding is the way we handle scaling out. And basically, rather than just have your collection be on one database, you want to put it on, let's say, some number of databases. It could be quite a large number of databases. And the goal is that it be transparent, that when you do access to some collection, like let's say you had some large orders collection and there were billions and billions of these items, that somehow you wouldn't need to have to figure out where it is in the system, and it would just work transparently. So the high-level approach to this is that you set up these shards, and I'll call them S1, S2, S3, S4, S5. And these shards are meant to split the data up from a particular collection. Now, the shards are typically in and of themselves replica sets. So we talked about what a replica set is. So there might be 3 hosts within a shard that make up this replica set, let's say R0, and the shard 1 is actually all part of this replica set. So in this case, I showed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these shards, and there might be actually 15 hosts involved because the shards are each a replica set. So you're going to make queries, and somehow these queries are going to get distributed. Now the way this works is that there is a router that came with your installation, and it is called MongoS. All right, and you probably saw that binary when you unpacked the installation for MongoDB, and that router is what's going to take care of this distribution for you. So it's going to keep some sort of connection pool or knowledge of all the different hosts, and it's going to route them properly. So the way we do sharding is we use a range-based approach, and there's a concept of a shard key. So let's say you have the orders collection, and maybe you can imagine a trivial sharding might be on the order ID, and we'll talk more about why that may or may not be a good idea as we get further on in this lesson. But if you were sharded on order ID, let's say that you queried and you asked for a certain order number, then the MongoS would have some sort of notion of the ranges of order numbers that are assigned to each shard. And this is done by way of a mapping of 2 chunks. So the idea is that your orders table would be broken up into chunks, and those chunks would have homes, and they could be potentially migrated by a balancer to make sure that it's going to stay balanced. And again, this is not the DBA course, so we're not going to extensively ask you to do administration on this, but just so you understand, so you have the orders collection, and it's broken up into these chunks of orders based on ranges of order IDs, and each of these chunks lives on a particular shard. And then when you do a query, and the application sends that query to a MongoS, and these MongoS's are then talking to replica sets, of course, that are running MongoDs. So these are all MongoDs. If the query can be satisfied by a particular shard, let's say you say I want order ID 10, it says, okay, let's look at my mapping. Order ID 10 maps to this chunk maps to this shard, and it will route it directly to the shard, and then you'll get back a response pretty quickly. On the other hand, if the query doesn't include the shard key, okay, and in this case the shard key was order ID, then what it'll do, it'll have to scatter this request to all the servers, send them up to all the servers, and then gather back the answer and then respond back to the application. So that's the way it would work if it could not utilize the shard key. In addition, when you're dealing with a sharded environment, and we're going to go through this a little bit more, you have to include the shard key on any insert because it needs to know where to put this thing. So once you declare that order ID, let's say, is a shard key, it's now illegal to have a document inside the orders collection that doesn't have an order ID because it wouldn't know what shard to put it in. Now, sharding is at a database level. You can say I want to shard or not shard a database, and then even beyond that, whether you want to shard or not shard a collection. And collections that aren't sharded are going to wind up on right here in shard 0 in the leftmost shard. And that may change in a future release of MongoDB, but that's the way it works today. So just to review at a high level, to get horizontal scalability, what we do is we shard, which means we break up a collection onto multiple logical hosts, and that we do that according to a shard key. The shard key is something you're going to determine. The shard key is some part of the document itself. If it was an orders table, it could be the order ID. You could also shard an underscore ID, which some people do for certain collections. We'll talk about why that may or may not be a good thing. Now, for a blog post table, it could be the post ID, and anything you want pretty much. And once you make that decision, then Mongo will then break up that collection into chunks and decide what shard each of the chunks lives on in a range-based way. And then any query that you make, which now has to be routed to a MongoS, will then go to the appropriate shards to answer your query. And by the way, in case you were wondering, yes, there can be more than one MongoS. They're really stateless, and they typically run on the same server as the application. And they're handled very much the same way, similar to the way a replica set would be handled, which is that if one of them goes down, then it'll connect to a different one. They're pretty stateless, so that's not too difficult to do. And the MongoS is now talk to a MongoD. Once you're in a sharded environment like this, and the shards again are probably almost always replica sets, you no longer connect directly to the MongoD with your application. You may, for administrative purposes, need to connect to this MongoD, but generally you don't. And if you use the Mongo shell, right, which is it's really just another application, kind of equivalent to this application, then rather than talk to a replica, you typically would connect it directly to MongoS, and it has a special indication in terms of its prompt to tell you that you're connected to a MongoS versus a MongoD. So, all right, that's sharding at a high level. Let's do a quiz about that. All right, so the quiz is: if a shard key is not included in a find operation, there are 3 shards, each with a replica set with 3 nodes. How many nodes will see the find operation? And the answers are 1, 3, 9, and 6. Choose your answer here.